I never thought I'd be someone who'd keep secrets. I was the kind of woman who followed rules, made checklists, folded laundry the second the dryer beeped. I married at 27, after dating Mark for 2 years. He was charming, driven, emotionally measured, the kind of man who impressed at dinner parties and always had a plan. We got married on a vineyard. The photos still look perfect. But the parts between those photos, they've become harder to look at. Our 3rd year of marriage settled into silence. We didn't argue, not really. We just existed around each other. He had a way of nodding when I spoke, but his eyes never stayed with me. His job demanded more, and I understood that. I always did. But there's a kind of loneliness that creeps in when you're lying beside someone every night and still feel forgotten. I started going to bed before him just to avoid the ache of being awake while he typed away in the other room. Then came the week his parents came to visit. Casual trip, just a few days during spring. His mom, Marla, was warm and affectionate, always fussing in the kitchen. His father, David, was quiet, observant. There was something grounded in the way he moved. The kind of calm that filled a room without needing to speak. He was in his early 50s, well-kept, a few gray streaks in his beard. He spoke when he had something to say, never before. And when he did, people listened. The first time he really looked at me, I was pouring coffee in the morning. Hair messy, no makeup, still in a sweatshirt. Mark didn't even glance up from his phone. But David said, "You look like someone who needs 5 more hours of sleep." It made me laugh in a way I hadn't in weeks. He smiled but didn't push the moment. Just sipped his coffee and walked out onto the patio. That small acknowledgement stuck with me all day. Over the next few days it was small things. He'd ask if I needed help with dishes. He'd compliment the seasoning in my cooking. Simple passing comments but sincere. He noticed things. Once, when I was trimming herbs in the backyard, he walked by and said, "You have a gentle way with things." It wasn't flirtation. Not yet. It was attention. And for someone like me, who had felt invisible for months, it was addictive. Mark stayed buried in work, even during their visit. He missed dinner once. Didn't say goodnight another night. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the living room floor, flipping through old wedding photos with Marla. David sat nearby, sipping wine. He looked over at one photo and said, "You look truly happy here." I paused, unsure how to respond. I looked down at the picture. My smile looked real. I just didn't recognize the woman anymore. That night, I stood on the balcony after everyone had gone to bed. I couldn't sleep. The breeze was cool, but it didn't chill me. I heard the sliding door behind me open and close softly. David stood beside me, quiet. We watched the streetlights without speaking. Then, after a long silence, he said, "You don't have to answer this, but are you okay?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to lie. But my throat tightened, and my eyes filled without warning. I nodded, swallowing the lump. "Just tired," I whispered. He didn't push. He just stood there, hands in his pockets. "Sometimes," he said, "being tired isn't about sleep." Then he walked back inside. I stared at the street for another 10 minutes, not because I was waiting, but because I didn't trust what I was feeling. The guilt came quietly, shapeless, unnamed. He hadn't done anything wrong. Neither had I. And yet, something had changed. The next day, I caught myself waiting for his comments, listening for his footsteps, choosing outfits more carefully. Just a little mascara. Lip balm instead of lipstick. Not obvious. Just better. I hated that I noticed him. I hated that I liked being noticed. That evening, I dropped a glass while drying dishes. It shattered, slicing my finger. David was the first to reach me. Mark didn't even glance up from his laptop. David took my hand, inspected the cut gently, and led me to the sink. "Cold water, then pressure," he said, his voice low. I watched his hands wrap a paper towel around mine. His skin was warm, steady. My breath caught just for a second. "Thank you," I whispered. He met my eyes, held them. "You're welcome." That was all. Later that night, lying in bed beside Mark's snoring body, I stared at the ceiling. My finger throbbed, but not from the cut. I thought about David's hands, the steadiness in his voice. The way he saw me really saw me. I hadn't felt that in so long. The guilt twisted in my gut like a knot I couldn't loosen. It wasn't love. Not yet. And maybe it wasn't even desire. But it was something. And in that moment, I realized I was teetering on the edge of a cliff I hadn't meant to climb. But I didn't step back. I didn't tell anyone. And I didn't want to. I just let it stay, humming beneath the surface, alive in the silence between us. The line between right and wrong didn't blur. It evaporated. I stopped trying to convince myself that David's attention was harmless. I knew what it was. I knew what I was doing. Every time I stayed in the kitchen a little longer when he walked in. Every time I chose to sit across from him instead of next to Mark. Every glance had weight. Every word had intent. It started with the way he lingered in conversation. Everyone else would go to bed, and somehow, he and I would still be talking. Nothing inappropriate. Not out loud. But our silences said things our mouths didn't. I remember one night he told me he used to paint. Ills mostly. Said he stopped when life got in the way. I told him I used to dance. Said the same. He looked at me, slow and quiet, and said, "We give up the things that make us feel alive, and we pretend we don't notice." My throat tightened again. Same as before. He always found the words I hadn't spoken aloud. The tension didn't live in touches. It lived in what we both refused to say. In the fact that we stood 2 feet apart and still felt heat like it was tangible. One afternoon, I reached for a plate and his hand brushed mine. Just skin on skin, but I pulled back too quickly. He apologized too politely. But we both knew it wasn't the plate that made my hand tremble. It was the feeling that had started to own me. He offered to help fix a drawer in the guest bedroom. Mark was at work, his mom out shopping. It was supposed to be nothing. He unscrewed a knob, adjusted the track. I stood at the door. We were talking, laughing softly. Then he stood up close, too close. We froze. He looked at me, eyes heavy with something I wasn't ready to name. His hand hovered near my hip. Not touching. Just close enough to make my skin burn. But he stepped back. Cleared his throat. "That should hold now," he said. He nodded. My voice wouldn't come. That night I dreamed about him. I remembered the scent of his cologne when I woke up. I remembered the warmth. I hated how vivid it all was. I hated that I wanted more. And still I didn't stop it. I started to fantasize. Not in a way that felt cinematic or romantic. In a way that felt raw and unwanted. I imagined what his hands would feel like without space between us. I imagined what he'd say if I told him everything I was afraid to admit. The guilt didn't stop those thoughts. It sharpened them. Made them feel like confessions locked behind my lips. Mark was barely around. His meetings ran late. He forgot things. Not just dates, me. He'd text me midday like I was a calendar reminder. Not a person he used to love. Pick up dry cleaning. Mom needs the guest code again. Not once. How are you feeling today? I stopped replying right away. I stopped trying. Then came the breaking point. Our anniversary. I had set the table, lit candles, cooked his favorite meal. He walked in an hour late, didn't notice the effort, kissed my forehead distractedly, and went straight to the couch to take a call. I stared at the untouched food, heart pounding, face hot. He didn't even ask why the house smelled different. David found me in the garden later. I didn't know he was outside. I was sitting on the grass, arms around my knees. He didn't say anything right away. Just sat down next to me, close but not too close. After a moment he said, "You deserved better tonight." I didn't look at him. Couldn't. "I don't think he even realizes I'm here anymore," I whispered. David's voice dropped low. "Some men think showing up is enough. They forget that being present means seeing the person standing in front of them." The tears came fast. I tried to hide them, but he reached over and gently placed his hand on mine. This time I didn't pull away. I let it stay. I let the warmth sink in. I turned to him and our eyes locked. It was the moment. We both knew it. My body leaned barely but enough. He moved closer. His lips were inches from mine. My breath caught. Then I turned away. "I can't," I said, barely above a whisper. He nodded, removed his hand. "I know." But something had broken loose. Something that wouldn't go back. I started avoiding being alone with him. Not because I didn't want it, but because I did. Too much. The pull had turned magnetic. Every room we shared felt electric, like the air was too thick to breathe. I saw it in his eyes too. He avoided me now. Avoided staying too long in conversation. It wasn't rejection. It was restraint. And that was worse. Every night I lay beside Mark, stiff and silent. I'd stare at the ceiling and think about everything I wasn't allowed to feel. Every morning, I dressed for a man who wasn't my husband. I told myself I was imagining it. That it was a crush. Harmless. But no one avoids each other because of a harmless crush. When I caught my reflection one evening, I saw a version of myself I didn't recognize. His darker. Shoulders straighter. Lips slightly parted like I'd been holding something in too long. I didn't feel like a cheater. Not yet. But I didn't feel like a wife either. The night before his parents were supposed to leave, I caught David looking at me during dinner. Just a second too long. I held his gaze. My chest tightened. My hands clenched beneath the table. We didn't speak after that. Not even good night. But I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I lay awake, listening to the hum of the fridge, the tick of the hallway clock, the silence between rooms. Every sound felt like it was counting down to something. I didn't know what, but I could feel it coming. And I didn't know if I'd stop it this time. The next morning felt too still. Everyone moved around the house like pieces on a board, but I was somewhere else entirely. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think straight. Mark left for work with a distracted kiss to the top of my head. Marla packed up a few leftovers, humming softly. David sat quietly at the kitchen table, drinking his coffee like nothing was different. But it was. Every nerve in my body said so. He stood before noon, said he was going to grab his things. I nodded, heart thudding. I told myself to go for a walk, leave the house, be smart. But instead, I went upstairs and started straightening the bed in the guest room. I wasn't thinking logically. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Then I heard his footsteps. He said he wanted to say goodbye. That they'd be heading out soon. I said I hoped the visit had been okay. He stepped into the room, looked around, then at me. Neither of us smiled. I think we both knew we were past pretending. I started to say something, anything, but he walked over and stood right in front of me. His hand brushed mine. He didn't ask permission. He didn't need to. Our mouths met like a dam breaking. There was no hesitation. Just weeks of tension collapsing all at once. My hands moved over him, unsure at first, then certain. His grip tightened at my waist. We didn't speak. It was slow. Not rushed, not reckless. It was deliberate, like every move was saying what we hadn't been able to. Every glance, every touch, full of everything we'd denied. The world narrowed to skin and breath and heat and wanting. My thoughts disappeared completely. I didn't think about Mark. I didn't think about the consequences. I only thought about how right it felt to be wanted that fully. He kissed me like he knew exactly where I ached. Touched me like he'd been imagining it as long as I had. There was no awkwardness. Only intensity. Familiarity that shouldn't have been there but was. My guilt hovered somewhere far away, drowned out by sensation. When it was over, we didn't say anything. We lay there, breathing heavy, silence stretching between us like a blanket. He looked over at me with something unreadable in his eyes. Not regret, not pride. Something more complicated. I stared at the ceiling, chest rising and falling, not sure what to feel. Eventually he stood, got dressed slowly, then paused at the door. "I won't say I'm sorry," he said. I didn't ask him to. He left without another word. I stayed in that room for over an hour. I couldn't move. I wrapped myself in the sheet, knees pulled up, heart racing with what I'd done. I wasn't crying. I wasn't panicked. Just hello. Like something had been taken from me and replaced with something I didn't recognize. The guilt came later. When the front door finally shut and the car pulled out of the driveway, it hit all at once. I went to the bathroom and showered. Not to clean myself physically, but because I didn't know what else to do. I stood under hot water until my skin turned red. No amount of scrubbing changed the way I felt. That night I didn't sleep. Mark lay next to me, oblivious. I watched his back rise and fall. I tried to remind myself of who we used to be. But all I could feel was distance. We were strangers pretending to remember what love felt like. 2 days later, David sent a message. Just 6 words. I don't regret it. Do you? I didn't answer. I stared at the text for hours. I typed replies and deleted them. Everything felt inadequate. I wasn't ready to speak about it. Not to him. Not to myself. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't confess. I folded the moment away, tucked it into the part of my memory I didn't visit often. But I thought about it constantly. Not just what we did, but why. What led me there. How easy it had been. How badly I'd needed to feel seen. I didn't imagine being with David again. It wasn't about a future. It was about that one moment where everything aligned. Where I wasn't invisible. Where my body was more than routine. My heart more than background noise. Mark remained oblivious. He started noticing me a little more ironically. Asked me to go out for dinner. Held my hand at the movies. Tried to be present. Let him. I smiled, laughed, played the part. I wanted it to feel real again. Sometimes it almost did. But something inside me had changed. A door had opened, and I couldn't unsee what was on the other side. I started avoiding family gatherings. I made excuses when Marla invited us over. I couldn't face David again, not yet. Not with everything unresolved. I didn't know what he expected from me, if anything. But I wasn't ready to find out. I saved his message. I don't know why. I never responded. But I never deleted it either. Some nights when I couldn't sleep, I'd open it again. Just to stare at the words. Just to remind myself that it really happened. That it wasn't a dream or a mistake made in my head. It was real. And no matter what came next, I'd always carry it with me. I stopped being the version of myself that lived for others. I didn't become reckless. I didn't self-destruct. I just recalibrated. I started choosing what made me feel alive. Even if no one understood. Even if I didn't fully understand it myself. What we did in that room didn't ruin me. But it ruined the illusion I'd been living in. And once illusions break, they don't come back. Weeks passed, and the weight of what happened didn't lift. It shifted. Became part of me. I didn't walk around crushed by guilt. I didn't wake up every day drowning in shame. But I noticed the silence between Mark and me more. I noticed how many conversations we avoided. How many touches felt rehearsed. I started to wonder if he felt it too. If he could sense the gap neither of us spoke about. Became more careful. Not paranoid. Just fit. I didn't overcompensate with affection. I didn't change routines drastically. But I saw myself doing things for appearances. Laughing louder around his friends. Reaching for his hand in public. I became good at pretending. And that realization hurt more than anything. David didn't reach out again. No text. No calls. He disappeared into silence, and I let him. I didn't chase him. I didn't need closure. What we had wasn't about continuation. It was about what got exposed. About the version of me I'd buried beneath marriage, responsibility, and denial. I wasn't proud of it, but I wasn't apologizing for it either. Happen meant something. And it changed everything, even if no one else knew. One night, I caught Mark staring at me while I folded laundry. He asked if I was okay. Said yes too quickly. He didn't press. That's what our relationship had become. Surface-level concern, easy exits. I started noticing how little we challenged each other. How we danced around conflict just to maintain routine. And for the first time, I didn't want to maintain anything. I stopped initiating things. Conversations. Intimacy. Plans. I waited to see if he would notice. If he'd fight for us. But nothing changed. He chalked it up to stress or hormones or life being busy. He didn't see the deeper shift. Or maybe he did and didn't want to acknowledge it. The guilt didn't come from what I did with David. It came from what I let go long before that. I stopped fighting for us months before I ever crossed a line. The affair didn't break us. Just exposed how broken we already were. I started journaling again. Nothing poetic. Just truths I couldn't say aloud. I wrote about how lonely marriage had felt. How tired I was of being the only one trying. How invisible I felt in my own home. I wrote about David but not romantically. Just factually. What he reminded me of. How being with him felt like someone turned the volume back up in my life. I didn't fantasize about being with him. I didn't want to blow up my marriage and start over. I just wanted to stop pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. I wanted space to be honest without being punished for it. One morning, Mark kissed me goodbye before leaving for work, and I barely registered it. After the door closed, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing. It hit me then. I didn't want to keep doing this. I didn't want to wake up 10 years from now in the same silence, the same distance. I didn't want to keep performing a life that no longer fit. I brought it up 2 days later. Only. No accusations. Just facts. I think we've both been feeling the distance, I said. He blinked, caught off guard. What are you talking about? I'm talking about us. About how long it's been since we felt connected. Really connected. He frowned. We've been busy. Life gets like that. That's not what I mean, and you know it. He got defensive like I expected. Said I was overthinking. Said we were fine. But I kept my voice steady. I don't think we're fine, Mark. I think we've been ignoring the cracks for so long, we've forgotten they're there. He didn't argue after that. He just sat back, eyes tired. Maybe he saw it too. Maybe he was just as worn out as I was. We didn't split that day. There was no blowout, no drama. Just silence. Heavy and honest. It was the first time in years it felt like we were truly looking at each other, not just existing side by side. In the following weeks we tried counseling. Not to fix it, but to understand if there was anything left worth saving. We talked more openly than we had in years. I didn't confess about David. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because that wasn't the root of our problem. The root was neglect, resentment, dullness that neither of us fought hard enough to prevent. Eventually we agreed to separate. It wasn't messy. It wasn't easy either. But it felt honest. Like we were finally respecting the truth instead of hiding from it. He moved out first. We kept things civil. We shared responsibilities, avoided drama, made space. Friends and family were surprised. They asked what happened. I just said, we stopped fitting. And that was enough. I didn't reach out to David. I didn't expect anything from him. I wasn't looking to replace one broken dynamic with another. I wanted to rebuild myself quietly, fully, without distraction. I started walking more, cooking for one, sleeping through the night without pretending. I didn't feel free in a dramatic way. I just felt clear, like I'd finally stopped lying to myself. The affair was a spark, not a solution. It woke me up, forced me to look at the life I was living and ask if I wanted more. I didn't need it to define me. I didn't glorify it. But I didn't regret it either. It was a moment, one I'll carry forever. A mark that changed the way I see myself. I used to think infidelity was about weakness, lack of control. But now I see it's often about absence. About what's missing, not just what's tempting. People don't stray because they want chaos. They stray because they're starving for something they can't name.